Dad, you're not safe living alone anymore. My daughter said it at exactly 8:12 p.m. I know the time because the microwave clock was blinking from the kitchen, and I remember glancing at it as if the numbers might argue with her. We were standing in my living room. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the old wall clock Margaret and I bought in 1987. My daughter, Emily, had her coat still on. My son-in-law, Brian, stood near the front door with his arms folded, looking past me as if he were already measuring the room for something else. Not safe, I repeated. You fell in the driveway last week, Emily said. You didn't tell us until 2 days later. I slipped on ice, I said. I bruised my hip. That's not a diagnosis. Brian stepped in then. It's not just that. The stairs, the yard, the maintenance. It's too much for you now. Too much. That phrase has a way of shrinking a man. I am 74 years old. I have lived in that house for 41 years. I installed the hardwood floors myself. I wired the garage when Emily was still in diapers. I replaced the roof twice. Too much was something I understood better than anyone in that room. I mow the lawn, I said calmly. I climb the stairs. I drive myself to the grocery store. Emily softened her voice. Dad, this isn't about pride. It's about safety. Safety is the cleanest word in the English language. It sounds like love. It feels like care. But sometimes it's the front door to control. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. Brian shifted his weight. We've been looking at assisted living facilities. There's one about 10 minutes from our house. Private apartments. On-site medical staff. We've toured it, Emily added quickly. It's nice. I didn't ask you to tour anything, I said. Silence settled into the room. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and took my time returning. If you rush in moments like that, you give away authority. I appreciate your concern, I said finally, but I am not moving. Emily's eyes filled. Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder for whom? For us, she said, her voice cracking. We worry every night. Brian spoke again, and we've already spoken with a realtor. Just to explore options. There it was. I felt the temperature change. You spoke with a realtor, I repeated. It doesn't mean anything, Emily said quickly. Just information. Information. I nodded once. Which realtor? Brian hesitated. Mark Reynolds from Oak Ridge Realty. I knew Mark. He'd sold 2 houses on this street in the last year. I'd spoken to him over the fence once about property taxes. And what did you tell him? I asked. That you might be downsizing, Brian said. He's coming by tomorrow evening to look at the place. At whose invitation? I asked. Emily met my eyes. Ours. It is a strange thing to hear your child speak about your home as if it were a shared asset. I had never put Emily's name on the deed. The house was titled in the name of the Thomas and Margaret Lawson Living Trust, created the year Margaret was diagnosed with cancer. I was the sole surviving trustee. I did not invite him, I said evenly, and I am not selling. Emily stepped closer. Dad, you're not thinking clearly about this. That sentence cut deeper than the word safety. I'm thinking very clearly, I replied. This house is not a family project. It is my home. Brian's jaw tightened. We're just trying to help. I understand, I said, but help requires permission. They left shortly after that. Emily hugged me tightly at the door as if I were already halfway gone. Brian gave me a firm nod and avoided my eyes. When the house grew quiet again, I sat at the dining room table and looked around. The china cabinet still held Margaret's wedding dishes. The framed photograph of Emily at age 7, missing her front tooth, sat above the fireplace. The banister had a small dent from when she dragged her bicycle inside during a thunderstorm. This house was not square footage, it was history. The next afternoon, I pulled the trust documents from the fireproof box in my bedroom closet. The trust had been simple. Upon our deaths, the house and assets would be divided equally between Emily and her brother, David, who lived 3 states away and had said nothing about my safety. Until then, control remained with me. I reviewed the deed, the trust certification, and the property tax statements. Everything was current. Insurance paid, utilities automatic, no liens, no joint ownership. Paper has a way of steadying the mind. At 7:58 p.m. the following evening, I heard a car door slam outside. Through the front window, I saw Emily's SUV and a dark sedan behind it. At exactly 8:12 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Emily, Brian, and a man in a charcoal coat holding a leather folder. "Mr. Lawson," he said politely. "Mark Reynolds, we spoke briefly last fall." "Yes," I said. Emily forced a smile. "Dad, this is just a conversation." Mark stepped inside cautiously. His eyes moved quickly around the room, taking inventory the way realtors do. "Beautiful property," he said. "You've kept it in excellent condition." "Thank you," I replied. Emily clasped her hands together. "Mark just wants to give us an idea of market value." "Why?" I asked. "In case you decide to move." "I have not decided to move." Brian cleared his throat. "Dad, please don't make this awkward." I gestured toward the dining table. "Let's sit." Mark opened his folder and began laying out comparable sales, square footage, sale prices, average days on market. "This area is strong right now," he said. "Homes like this are moving quickly." I listened without interruption. Then I reached into the fireproof box I had set beside my chair and removed a single sheet of paper. Mark glanced at it as I placed it on the table. "What's that?" he asked. "The trust certification," I said. "You'll want to review it." He looked confused, but picked it up. Emily frowned. "Dad." Mark scanned the document, and I watched his expression change, not dramatically, just a tightening around the eyes. "This property is held in a living trust," he said slowly, "with you as sole trustee." "That's correct." "And you have not authorized any listing agreement." "I have not." He set the paper down carefully. "I'm sorry," he said to Emily and Brian. "I cannot proceed without the trustee's direct consent." Silence filled the room. Emily looked at me, her face pale. "Dad, we were just trying to help." "I know," I said quietly. Mark gathered his papers. "I apologize for any confusion," he said, already stepping toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at me. "Mr. Lawson," he said, his voice lower now, "if you ever do decide to sell, I'd be honored to represent you." "Thank you," I replied. The door closed behind him. Emily stood frozen in the middle of the living room. Brian's arms were still crossed, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. "You embarrassed us," he said finally. "No," I said. "I clarified." Emily's voice trembled. "You think we're trying to take advantage of you?" "I think you're moving faster than I am." She wiped her eyes. "We just don't want something to happen." "Something will happen," I said gently. "Eventually, but it hasn't happened yet." The house was quiet again by 9:00 p.m. I sat at the table with the trust document in front of me and felt something shift. It wasn't anger. It was awareness. Emily had not tried to steal the house. She had tried to move the timeline forward. But timelines are not transferable property. And I had just realized something else. This was not the end of it. Because when someone believes you are unsafe living alone, they don't stop at a realtor. They look for other levers. Medical, financial, legal. And I had a feeling that the next knock on my door wouldn't come from a man in a charcoal coat. It would come from somewhere much harder to refuse. The next knock did not come from a realtor. It came from my own doctor's office. 3 days after the failed visit with Mark Reynolds, I received a voicemail from Dr. Patel's receptionist. "Mr. Lawson, we'd like to schedule a cognitive wellness check. Your daughter called expressing some concerns." There it was. Medical. I called back immediately. "Concerns about what?" I asked. "Wellness protocol," the receptionist said carefully. "Standard precaution at your age." Standard precaution. The phrase felt rehearsed. "I'll schedule it," I said. Not because I believed I needed it. Because documentation defeats implication. The appointment was set for the following Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. I drove myself, parked in my usual spot, and walked in without assistance. Dr. Patel greeted me with the same calm smile he had worn for years. "Thomas," he said, "how are you feeling?" "Capable," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Your daughter mentioned a fall." I slipped on ice. I bruised my hip. It healed. He made a note. She also expressed concerns about forgetfulness. "I forget where I leave my glasses," I said. "I don't forget how to pay my property taxes." A faint smile touched his face. "We're just going to run a standard cognitive screening," he said. "Routine. Routine is harmless when it's truly routine." The test was straightforward: memory recall, word association, serial subtraction, financial reasoning scenarios. "If you needed to withdraw $10,000 from a retirement account," he asked casually, "what would you consider first?" "Tax implications," I replied. "Capital gains exposure and required minimum distributions." He wrote that down. At the end of the session, he closed the folder. "Thomas, your cognitive function is well within normal parameters." "Well within," I repeated. "Yes." "I'd like that in writing," I said. He looked up. "Of course." Paper steadies accusations. When I returned home, there was an envelope in the mailbox. Oak Ridge Realty. I opened it at the kitchen counter. Inside was a neatly typed letter from Mark. "Mr. Lawson, after reviewing the trust certification you provided, I feel it appropriate to clarify that no listing can occur without your direct written authorization as sole trustee. I apologize for any discomfort caused. Sincerely, Mark Reynolds." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the fireproof box. That box was becoming heavier. 2 evenings later, Emily called. "Dad, did you go to Dr. Patel?" "Yes." "And?" "He confirmed I am well within normal parameters." Silence. "That's good," she said. "It is. We were just worried." "I understand." But worry had begun to feel like strategy. The following week, I received another call. This time from my bank. "Mr. Lawson," Sandra said, "we received an inquiry regarding whether you have designated any joint account holders recently." "No," I replied. "The inquiry came from your son-in-law." I closed my eyes briefly. "And what did you tell him?" "That we cannot disclose account structure without your authorization." "Good. Is everything all right?" "Everything is documented," I said. Documentation was becoming a pattern. I called Emily that evening. "Did Brian contact my bank?" I asked calmly. She hesitated. "He was just trying to understand your setup." "My setup has not changed in 22 years. He thought maybe simplifying would help." "Help whom?" Silence again. "Dad," she said softly, "you're taking this the wrong way." "No," I replied. "I'm taking it exactly the way it's happening." There is a difference between care and coordination. Care asks. Coordination moves without asking. Over the next month, I noticed subtle shifts. Emily began suggesting small, safety improvements. Maybe we should install railings on the stairs. They're already installed. Maybe we should put you on a shared calendar app so we know where you are. I have a phone. Maybe we should consolidate your accounts so they're easier to manage. They are easy to manage. Each suggestion sounded harmless in isolation. Together, they felt like preparation. One afternoon, David called from Colorado. "Has been talking," he said bluntly. "About what?" "She thinks you're declining." "And you?" "I think she's nervous." "About what?" "About losing you." "Loss." That word softens everything. "I'm not gone," I said. "I know." David paused. She also mentioned something about joint ownership. "That won't happen." "Good." At least one child understood the difference between concern and claim. I began reorganizing my financial life more deliberately. Not because anything was unstable, because clarity reduces vulnerability. I moved my brokerage accounts to require in-person verification for ownership changes. I added a written instruction to my bank that no new joint holders were to be added without notarized documentation and direct confirmation from me. Sandra handled it without drama. "We see this more often than people realize," she said. "Families?" I asked. "Yes. Concern can be expensive." She nodded. "It can also be protective," she added. "Only when invited." One evening in late spring, I heard tires in the driveway. Emily and Brian stepped out together. They didn't call first. I opened the door before they rang the bell. "Can we come in?" Emily asked. "Of course." We sat in the living room. Brian placed a folder on the coffee table. "What's this?" I asked. "Assisted living brochures," he said. "Again." "They're just options." "For when?" "For when something happens." "What exactly?" Silence. "Dad," Emily said, "we can't pretend this won't become necessary." Necessary for whom? For us to feel secure. There it was. Security for them. Not safety for me. "You're not unsafe," I said quietly. "You're impatient." Brian bristled. "That's not fair." "It's accurate." The room felt smaller. "You think we want your house?" he asked sharply. "I think you're rearranging timelines." Emily's eyes filled again. "We just don't want to be caught unprepared." "You won't be," I said. "The trust specifies everything. And if you become incapable suddenly, then the successor trustee steps in." "And who is that?" she asked. I looked at her calmly. "Not you." That landed hard. "Who?" Brian pressed. "Elaine Porter. My attorney." Silence. "You named your lawyer over your own daughter?" Emily asked, stunned. "I named someone neutral." "That hurts," she said. "So did the realtor." That ended the conversation. They left quietly. I stood in the doorway, watching their car disappear down the street. This was no longer about safety. It was about control over uncertainty. And uncertainty is something no document can eliminate. But documents can prevent misinterpretation. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. Emily stopped pushing. No more brochures. No more options. No more calendar suggestions. Instead, she visited without an agenda. We had coffee. We talked about her work. We discussed David's kids. The house felt like a home again. Until one afternoon, when I received a certified letter. County Probate Court. I sat down before opening it. The petition was brief. Request for evaluation of capacity and temporary conservatorship review. Filed by Emily Lawson. The room went quiet in a way it never had before. This was no longer suggestion. No longer pressure. No longer brochures. This was legal. And legal has consequences. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the trust document in the fireproof box. The box was heavier now. Not with paper, with implication. And I understood something clearly in that moment. The realtor freezing had only slowed them. It hadn't stopped them. Because when someone believes you are not safe living alone, they will look for any authority willing to agree. The next authority was the court. And this time, I would not simply clarify. I would demonstrate. Quietly. Publicly. With more than a trust document. With proof. The courthouse smelled like old paper and floor polish. I arrived 15 minutes early, as I always do. I wore the same navy blazer I had worn at Thanksgiving, not as a symbol, but because it fit well and felt familiar. In my briefcase were 3 things: the cognitive evaluation from Dr. Patel, the trust certification, and 5 years of organized financial statements showing steady patterns of income, withdrawals, and charitable contributions. When your capacity is questioned, your calm becomes evidence. Emily and Brian were already seated when I entered the courtroom. Emily avoided my eyes. Brian's jaw was set in the way it had been during the Realtor visit. They looked less confident than I expected. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with sharp glasses and sharper posture, began without theatrics. This is a petition for conservatorship review filed by the petitioner, Emily Lawson, regarding her father, Thomas Lawson. Conservatorship. A quieter word than guardianship, just as powerful. Ms. Lawson, the judge said, you allege concerns about your father's safety living alone and financial judgment. Do you have medical documentation supporting incapacity? Emily glanced at Brian before answering. We have concerns about his judgment, she said. He fell recently. He refuses assistance. He's making large financial decisions. What kind of financial decisions? The judge asked. Withdrawals, donations, asset management without consulting family. The judge turned to me. Mr. Lawson. I stood. I am 71 years old, I began. I own my home through a living trust. My taxes are current. My insurance is paid. I maintain detailed financial records. I have undergone cognitive evaluation at my own request. I have the documentation here. I handed the report forward. The judge read it carefully. No cognitive impairment, she read aloud. Executive functioning intact. She looked at Emily again. Do you have contradictory medical evidence? No, Emily admitted. Then on what legal basis are you requesting conservatorship? Silence. We're worried, she said finally. The judge leaned back slightly. Worry is not legal incapacity. Those words changed the temperature of the room. The judge continued, Mr. Lawson, are you currently managing your own finances? Yes. Have you missed payments, defaulted on obligations? No. Have you been subject to financial exploitation? No. The judge closed the file. This petition is denied. The gavel tapped once. Not loud. Just definitive. Outside the courtroom, Emily tried to speak. Dad. I held up a hand, gently. This is not about winning, I said quietly. It's about boundaries. Brian stepped in. We just don't want something to happen. Something will happen, I said. Eventually, that's not a legal condition. Emily's eyes filled. We were afraid. Fear is understandable, I replied. Control is not. They did not argue. Fear dissolves quickly when it loses authority. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Mark Reynolds called me. I heard about court, he said carefully. Emily mentioned it. I imagine she did. I wanted to clarify something. I won't entertain any future discussions about listing your property without written authorization directly from you. I've made that clear to your daughter. I appreciate that. Your documentation was thorough, he added. It made the situation simple. Simple. Paper makes things simple. Later that week, Sandra from the bank invited me in for coffee. Your daughter inquired about joint access again, she said, after the hearing. And I reiterated policy. Thank you. She leaned forward slightly. Thomas, may I say something off record? Please. I've seen families fracture over far less. You've handled this with remarkable restraint. Restraint preserves dignity, I replied. She smiled faintly. Emily did not call for several days. When she finally did, her voice was softer. I didn't mean for it to go that far. It already had. I thought if a judge saw it, she'd tell you to slow down. She told you to stop. Silence. Dad, I don't want to fight. Then don't. I just don't want to lose you. You don't lose someone by letting them live. That line seemed to settle something inside her. In the weeks that followed, something changed. The suggestions stopped. The brochures disappeared. The quiet pressure evaporated. Instead, Emily began asking different questions. How are you feeling? She asked one afternoon. Capable. Do you need anything? I need you to trust what I've built. That was the real request. Trust. Not money. Not property. Trust. Brian came by alone one evening. I pushed her, he admitted. For what? For control. Why? Because uncertainty makes me uncomfortable. Uncertainty makes everyone uncomfortable. He nodded. I thought if we controlled the assets, we controlled the outcome. That's not how life works. He understood that now. Control does not prevent loss. It only accelerates conflict. By late summer, something else happened. David flew in from Colorado. He sat at my kitchen table, reviewing the trust document without prompting. You structured this carefully, he said. Yes. I don't want to change it. Good. He looked up at me. Em was scared. I know. She thought she was helping. I know. He leaned back. But you're fine. Yes. He nodded once. Then that's enough. That was the first moment I felt something close to relief. Not because the court denied the petition, but because my children were finally separating fear from authority. Autumn approached again. The house looked the same. The oak tree in the front yard dropped leaves across the driveway. The stairs still creaked slightly at the third step. I still mowed the lawn. The difference was invisible from the outside. But internally, something fundamental had shifted. Emily stopped trying to rearrange my timeline. Brian stopped trying to preempt my decisions. And I stopped needing to defend my competence. Because the court had already done that. Documentation had spoken. And when documentation speaks, accusation fades. But the story wasn't finished yet. Not emotionally. Legal denial is not reconciliation. It is clarity. Reconciliation requires something else. Humility. And I was waiting to see whether that would arrive. Not in a courtroom, but at the same table where it had all begun. The second Thanksgiving felt quieter. Not awkward, not strained, just measured. The table was set the same way it always had been. The same china. The same carved turkey platter Margaret insisted we use every year. The same seat at the head of the table waiting for me. But something subtle had changed. No one mentioned safety. No one mentioned selling. No one mentioned inheritance. We passed dishes. We talked about David's kids. Emily laughed at something Brian said. It felt almost ordinary. Almost. Halfway through dinner, Emily cleared her throat. "Dad," she said softly. The room stilled. "I need to say something." She stood, not dramatically, just deliberately. "I was wrong," she said, "about the house, about the court, about thinking you weren't safe." No one interrupted. "I let fear turn into control," she continued, "and I confused love with authority." Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't look away. "I'm sorry." It was not a theatrical apology. It was specific. Specific apologies carry weight. I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. "I forgive you," I said. Not because I felt pressured to. Because I meant it. Brian spoke next. "I pushed it," he admitted. "I kept telling myself we were protecting you." "You were protecting yourselves," I replied calmly. He nodded. Yes. That honesty mattered more than the courtroom ruling ever had. Because the court had restored legality. This restored dignity. The meal continued, lighter now. After dessert, Emily stayed behind to help with dishes. "I didn't understand how it felt," she said quietly at the sink. "How what felt?" "Being treated like you were already gone." I dried a plate slowly. "When you talk about inheritance while someone is still alive," I said, "you shorten them." She winced. "I didn't mean to." "I know. And I don't want that." "Then don't." That was the boundary. Simple. Clear. Earned. Over the following months, the tone shifted completely. Emily still checked in, but differently. "Do you want help with the yard?" she'd ask. "Yes," I'd say if I did. "Do you want me to come to that doctor's appointment?" No, if I didn't. The difference was consent. Care offered, not imposed. Brian stopped suggesting structural changes. Instead, he asked questions. "How did you structure the trust?" he asked one evening while we sat in the living room. "Very carefully," I replied. "I never understood how much thought went into it." "That's because you only saw the outcome, not the years behind it." He nodded. "I see that now." By winter, something unexpected happened. Emily asked to meet with Elaine. Not to challenge anything, to understand it. We sat together in the attorney's office, reviewing the trust line by line. "This doesn't change until you pass," Emily said slowly. "No. And until then, you have full control." "Yes. And if something does happen medically, the successor trustee activates." She leaned back. "You thought about all of this decades ago." "Yes." She smiled faintly. "I underestimated you." "That's common." We both laughed lightly. The laughter wasn't forced. It was release. In early spring, I made one small amendment to the trust. Not out of anger. Out of structure. I added a clause requiring 2 independent medical evaluations before any conservatorship petition could be filed by a family member in the future. Elaine drafted it carefully. I signed it. I showed Emily afterward. That's fair, she said. Fairness prevents fear from escalating, I replied. She didn't argue. That was growth. Growth does not erase what happened. It builds beyond it. Summer came again. I slipped once more on wet grass while watering the garden. This time, Emily arrived quickly. Not with brochures. With ice. You okay? She asked. Yes. Sure. Yes. She smiled. Good. She didn't suggest moving. She didn't mention facilities. She didn't look at the stairs like they were evidence. She looked at me like I was present. That was the change. Not in paperwork. In perception. One afternoon in late August, David called. I'm proud of you, he said. For what? For not blowing up. I considered it. I know. But you didn't. No. Why? Because anger clouds clarity. Silence followed. You kept it steady, he said. Yes. Steady. That word stayed with me. Because that is what this was about. Not winning. Not dominating. Steady. Steady against assumption. Steady against narrative. Steady against fear. If you're listening to this, and you've ever had someone question your competence because of your age, remember this. Age is not incapacity. Concern is not control. And safety does not require surrendering authority. There is a difference between care and possession, between love and leverage, between preparation and preemption. When someone says, "You're not safe living alone anymore," ask yourself one question. Are they responding to evidence or to fear? And if it's fear, respond with clarity. Not shouting. Not resentment. Documentation. Conversation. Boundaries. Because documentation does something anger cannot. It stabilizes. The trust document did not save me. My composure did. The court did not restore my dignity. It confirmed it. And Emily did not become a villain. She became human. Humans make mistakes when they are afraid. They correct them when they are willing. Reconciliation is not immediate. It is earned. It is slow. It requires admission. And it requires the older generation to remain steady long enough for the younger one to grow. I still live in the house. The stairs still creak. The oak tree still drops leaves across the driveway. And every Thanksgiving since, the table feels different. Not lighter because nothing happened. Stronger because something did. And when Emily looks at me now, she doesn't see a timeline. She sees her father. That is enough. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. Not on anger. On clarity. If you've ever had to defend your independence, you know how quiet that defense must be to endure. And if you're still in the middle of it, remember. Set down the fork. Reach for the document. Stay steady. Truth does not need volume. It only needs patience.